In the center of all that is a gift. It's not what we do for God's sake, but it's what we do for our sake. Worship sets us free. That may seem a strange way to talk about finding hope in worship, but worship, true Christian worship, is and always will be about God. I was fortunate growing up to always go to the beach. Every summer that I can remember, my parents would take us to Gulf Shores. And we would go out on the beach, and I would get extremely sunburned because I did not like sunscreen. And I was too fast for my parents to catch me. But one of the things that I would always do on the beach is I loved to make sandcastles. I don't know if you have done that before. At the beach, there's lots of sand. There's lots of sandcastles to be made. You can shape it however you like. And so, of course, as a child, I would dig in the sand to pull out sand to make my sandcastle. And it wasn't long as a child before I realized that no matter when I came to the beach, didn't matter if it was summertime, wintertime, spring or fall, it didn't matter what part of the beach I was at, whether I was down towards Fort Morgan or whether I was closer to Florida, everywhere that I tried to make a sandcastle, I would find something when I would dig in the sand. Every time. If you dig deep enough in the sand at the beach, what do you find? What's under that sand? What's in that sand? There's lots of shells, sure, but there's always water. There's water. If you dig deep enough in the sand, you will find water. And as a child, I remember being so fascinated by that water and thinking, how did it get there? This is amazing. There's water in the bottom of this hole. And as a child, I would dig that sand out, and then I would use that water to make my sandcastles. And I thought that water was such a gift. It was right there. How did it get there? What was it doing there? And of course, where did that water come from? The Gulf is right there. As a child, I would look into the sand and I'd dig into the sand and I would build these sandcastles and I'd look at that water and I would be like, oh, look at that water. All the while, right next to me was the source of that water, the Gulf. I'm married to someone from Pensacola, so I know you're not supposed to call it the ocean. The Gulf. And yet, as a child, I remember looking across that water and thinking, man, it's so big. I can't see it all, right? So much water. And yet, building my sandcastle, all I could see was that water at the bottom of my hole. In a way, that water at the bottom of the hole in the beaches of Gulf Shores, for me, has been a metaphor for what it means to experience God in worship. Worship is like digging and digging and building and finding the source of all life at the bottom of the hole. Even if it's just part of the gulf next to us. Worship is like that. It gives us a window into the love of God. It gives us a window into the hope that God has for us. Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 6, has a vision of worship that can help us see hope made helpful in worship. God, not me, not us, is the center of the universe, the center of all that is. That means that worship gives us hope because when we worship, when we focus on God, it allows us to see beyond ourselves. The implication is that the world bends to someone else's will, right? The implication of worship is that I don't have to bear the weight of all that is. Worship gives us freedom. Freedom from being the center of everything. Freedom even from the idols that may leave us empty. Freedom from oppression. From whatever may bind us in worship. And even during worship, we can just be. Just the way worship lets us be is a gift. Because it allows us to grow into ourselves. In Isaiah chapter 6, we see this vision. It's a moment where the prophet invites us to look beyond ourselves. To say it a different way, worship should blow our minds. Worship should blow our minds. Isaiah's vision of worship should blow our minds. Partially because it happens at a specific time. I don't know if you heard Ashley mention King Uzziah, but when he died, somewhere around 724 or 742, or maybe as late as 336 BCE, Isaiah had a vision. That was a long time ago, y'all. That was 700 years before Jesus was on this planet, 700 years before 2021. It should blow our minds that God has been moving that long. And even that Israel and people of faith have been worshiping God for so long. Israel was born in a world divided by empires, like Assyria, in Isaiah's world. Y'all, everything about this passage is mind-blowing. In his vision, Isaiah sees God on his throne, but all he really catches is the hem of his garment filling the temple. Even that, very edge of his garment, blows Isaiah's mind blown. And then there are the seraphs, or the seraphim. These, that translates, by the way, to fiery ones, angelic attendants of God, with 6 wings. 2 covering their faces, because no one, not even angels, can fully look at God's glory directly. 2 covering their feet, so they're not naked, heaven forbid. And 2 helping them get around. Right? Mind blown! These people in this vision, or these angels in this vision, are heaven. And everything in Isaiah's vision is heaven. And I don't know if you noticed this, but in his vision, he hears the seraphs singing song number 64 in the Methodist hymnal, Holy, Holy, Holy. It's right there in our hymnal. You can find the hymnal right in front of you in the pew. They are singing that song. Mind blown. This vision is too big for us to hold on to. And Isaiah isn't even done yet. He realizes what a precarious situation this is to be a man with unclean lips, a man who sometimes says things that aren't very godly, to be a man from a people who sometimes were kind of ungodly. And he expects, woe, destruction. But instead of destruction, an angel blots out Isaiah's sins. Again, mind blown. Then, as if things haven't been crazy enough, he hears the voices of God asking for someone to participate in worship. God. Mind blown, right? Worship does this. Worship blows our minds. Y'all, there's a lot in this world that might blow our mind, but I want to share just a photo with you that blew a lot of minds when people saw it first. I wonder if you've ever seen this picture before. It's called Earthrise. It was taken by Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders. And Anders, the mission's photographer, he'd been capturing the images of the moon's surface during Apollo 8's orbit when his home planet came into view, right? And the news quoted him as saying, "It didn't take long for the moon to become boring. It was like dirty beach sand." He goes on to say, then we suddenly saw this object called Earth. It was the only color in the universe. As Anders later said, we came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is that we discovered the Earth. This photo blew people's minds. It gave people a sense of wonder for what they thought they already knew. It gazed upon Earth in a new way and created a sense of awe, something bigger than us. In effect, it helped people blow their minds. Some have credited this photo with beginning the movement that became Earth Day. But specifically for Christians, it simultaneously humbles us and it exalts God. You are looking today at the hem of God's garment. I don't know about you, but when I look at this picture, it makes me think about things differently. Like Isaiah's vision in chapter 6, it gives me hope. And this is the hope of worship, that it will restore our hope. The first thing that Isaiah notices in this vision is that he doesn't belong here, right? But God has a way to deal with folks who feel like they may be out of place, burdened, trapped, unaware of what life may be like. God, in worship, has a way of setting us free. Yesterday, we got to honor a wonderful woman named Dorothy Lister, who many of us had the joy of knowing. And of course, if you were here yesterday, or if you knew Dorothy, one of the great things that made Dorothy so special was her love of dance. Yesterday, Andy Waltrip talked about how she had, in so many ways, invited him to think about dance as a way of thinking about himself. And Andy was clear yesterday. He said, this isn't just my story. There's so many people like this. That Dorothy gave them hope. Hope in what they could be. Hope in what they could accomplish. Y'all, what Dorothy did is nothing short of worship. And she invited other people to be a part of that. Worship restores our hope. It restores our faith in humanity. It restores our understanding of what life can be. Thank God for Dorothy and her dance, and her ballet. She gave so many people hope for what life could be. Her dancing was a kind of worship that found its way into the hearts of the people that she loved, the people who loved her. Y'all, this is what we discover when we hope to make hope happen through worship. We find that worship also spreads our hope. It not only instills, reinvigorates the hope that it's within us, but it helps us to spread our hope. Or maybe to say it a bit more clearly, God's hope is embodied in us, and when we worship, we restore that hope, and it gives us tools to share that hope. So Isaiah receives from God in his vision a very clear mission. And there's a reason I asked Ashley to stop it for a second. It's because in verses 9 through 13, you should totally read it. It's a hard mission. I mean, I wish I could tell you that Isaiah received this mission from God to go and spread the word and go and share all this beautiful, wonderful stuff and the love of God. You know what God basically tells Isaiah to go and tell Israel? Hey guys, you're going to look for salvation, and you're not going to find it. You're going to hear about God's love, and you're not going to receive it. If you read Isaiah 6, after this hopeful moment where this humble man is in God's presence and says, woe is me, and has his sin blotted out, God gives Isaiah a mission. And it's a strange hope. You will find in verse 13, after some hard words, some hope. Isaiah is reminded in this passage, of course, that he needs to go and share a hard message. But then in verse 13, the stump remaining standing where it is felled, the holy seed is its stump. Even when destruction happens, even when Isaiah shares a hard message, hope is spread. Y'all know I love to run. I've talked about that before. And if you run enough, or even if you like walking, there's a difference in running on concrete and soil. All right? So when I was learning how to run, when I was talking to people who knew what they were doing, I asked them, I said, how should I run? They said, as much as you can, stay off the pavement. I said, what? Isn't that the whole idea? That's the idea. I'm supposed to run on pavement. I find sidewalks, I find streets that are safe. I run on pavement. And Scotty, who was trying to help me, said, no. You need to run on soil because it's better for your knees. It's softer. It's easier. And so I try doing it. Try to run where I can, like on Maygarden, on all the grass. But when I get home and I take off my shoes, do you know what I find from my running? On my shoes, these little stickers. Right? They find their way even onto my Nikes. And I bet I've dropped a bunch of them in my backyard. I bet I've deposited them across Pensacola. See, what's really interesting about being with God, about this journey with God, is that even as we traverse across worship and across life and across wherever God may take us, there are little seeds of hope that we as followers of Christ can share with people. Little ways that we can spread hope. Isaiah's message may be clear. It does not end with a hard word. Instead, the holy seed, the stump that is left, this is the hope that Isaiah gets to share with them. Now, Isaiah's historic commissioning, his vision does not come out of thin air. Only someone who's been purified, only someone who's had their iniquities dealt with, only somebody who has been humbled can hear the voice of God say, "Who shall we send?" And that's what Isaiah responds to. Of course, it's worth pointing out that Isaiah wasn't very happy with the message God gave him. So Isaiah asks in the scripture, "How long, O Lord?" I'll point out that even in the vision of Isaiah, even in this sanctuary, even in God's presence, questions are allowed. God asks a question, "Who shall we send?" And that leads to a question for us, for Isaiah. The question, of course, is whom shall I send and who will go for us? Who is going to share hope through worship? When Isaiah hears that question, he says, "Here I am, send me." What a weird question. What a weird happenstance. Here is this throne room, this mind-blowing revelation of God. And the only way to get out of that space is for this man, imperfect as he is, to go and to share the good news. Our God is so much more inclined to invite people into the presence of God than to deny them. Our God is so much more likely to use ordinary people like Isaiah, like you and like me, to invite others into the hope that we can have in a God beyond our comprehension. Who's going to go for us? Isaiah's answer is, "Here I am, send me." What's our answer going to be? Right? How are we going to have hope be made helpful in worship? I have a suggestion, a call to action, so to speak. If we are busy making sandcastles, if we are busy digging in the dirt, if we discover through all of our efforts and through all of our lives, underneath all of it, we discover this loving God in the pool at our feet, may we pay some attention to the gulf that is next to us, to the unfathomable, incomprehensible, mind-blowing, hope-restoring, hope-sending worship of a living God. So my suggestion to you is this. Offer some attention. Offer some attention to our God. Offer some attention to those that God loves. Worship is truly just attention. That's your call to action. Share some attention with somebody who needs it. And in so doing, we'll make hope